On the edge of a forgotten road, a 15-year-old boy lives with his grandmother, who carries secrets he could never imagine. Between his studies and taking care of her, one mystery remains. His father disappeared when he was just a baby, and his grandmother never speaks about his mother. But one ordinary afternoon, while tending to the fruit stand, something unexpected happens. A lost and disoriented girl appears on the road, and in that moment, the boy's fate is about to change in ways he could never foresee. "What's your name?" Nolan asked while watching the girl slowly regain her strength. She looked at him, still panting, her eyes confused but grateful. "Luna," she replied weakly, still holding the half of the orange Nolan had given her. "My name is Luna." Nolan watched her with concern. She seemed lost, her hair disheveled and her clothes dirty with dust, as if she had been walking aimlessly for a long time. He knew something was very wrong, but for some reason, she didn't seem able to explain what had happened. He tried to remain calm despite the growing anxiety in his chest. "Do you live around here?" he asked. Luna shook her head, her face still pale. "No. I was with my father, but I don't know where he is." Her voice began to tremble, and Nolan realized that, besides being physically weak, she was also scared. Nolan looked around, but the road was as deserted as always. No cars passed by and the sun was beginning to set on the horizon. He knew he had to act quickly. "Wait here," he said, running back to the tent. His heart raced. He needed help, and fast. He grabbed the old, worn-out phone they kept in the tent for emergencies. He called one of the neighbors, Mr. Samuel, a kind man who was always willing to help. "Hello, Mr. Samuel. It's Nolan. There's a girl here by the road. She's in bad shape. I think she needs help." After a quick explanation, Mr. Samuel promised to come immediately. Nolan returned to Luna, who was now sitting on the ground, still a bit dazed, but breathing better. "My grandpa is coming. He'll help get you to a safe place," Nolan said, trying to keep his voice calm. "You're going to be okay." Luna looked at him with a mix of relief and fear. "Thank you. If you hadn't been here..." Her sentence trailed off, incomplete, but the weight of her words hit Nolan like a wave. He had never thought someone would depend on his help so much. The silence between them was interrupted by the sound of Mr. Samuel's old car approaching on the dirt road, kicking up dust. He parked next to the tent and hurried over, a serious expression on his face. "Is this the girl?" he asked, looking at Luna with concern. Nolan nodded. "She was nearly fainting when I found her." "All right, let's take her to the police station. They can help find her father," Mr. Samuel said, helping Luna up and into the car. Before leaving, Luna looked at Nolan, her eyes still teary, but there was a glimmer of gratitude in them. "Thank you again, I won't forget you." Nolan just smiled, waving as Mr. Samuel's car disappeared down the road. The weight of the situation finally began to settle on him. What had happened to Luna's father, and why had she been so far alone? Night fell quickly, bringing with it an unsettling silence. Nolan was left alone on the road, pondering what had just happened. He returned to the tent and began to take it down, but his mind was far away, full of questions and uncertainties. When he returned home, Grandma Helena was already sitting at the table, waiting for him with their usual simple dinner, vegetable soup and bread. She smiled softly at Nolan, but immediately sensed that something had happened. "You're quiet today, my son. Did something happen?" Nolan sat at the table, still thinking about Luna. He told his grandmother everything that had happened on the road, from the moment he saw the girl until Mr. Samuel arrived. Grandma Helena listened attentively, her hands resting over her bowl of soup. When he finished, she took a deep breath, looking at him with a mix of pride and concern. "You did the right thing, Nolan. You saved a life today," she said, her voice firm and caring. "Not everyone would have known what to do. I knew you had something special in you." Nolan felt the weight of responsibility in her words, but at the same time, a spark of hope ignited within him. Maybe, just maybe, he could really become what he dreamed of, someone who helps others, just like he helped Luna. But life in the village had always been full of twists, and Nolan knew that even with Luna's gratitude, the future was still uncertain. As he lay down that night, Her face continued to appear in his mind. Who knew what fate had in store for him? Sleep came slowly as he stared out the window at the starry sky. The road remained silent, but something inside Nolan was already beginning to change. He just didn't know how much yet. The sound of a glass falling to the floor broke the morning silence. "Grandma, are you all right?" Nolan asked, rushing to the kitchen. Upon entering, he found Grandma Helena leaning against the sink, breathing heavily, her trembling hands gripping the counter to stay upright. The glass she had been using lay shattered on the wooden floor. "I just felt a bit dizzy, my grandson." "Don't worry," she said with a weak smile, trying to hide her frailty. "It will pass soon." But Nolan knew something was wrong. Grandma Helena had never shown such clear signs of weakness before. Although she was an elderly woman, she had always been strong. He approached her, helping her sit down at the table. The worry in his chest grew. His heart felt tight, seeing his grandmother like this. "I think we should go to the doctor, Grandma." Grandma Helena shook her head, as stubborn as ever. "There's no need for that, Nolan. I'm old. It's normal to feel a little weak from time to time. Some tea and rest will fix it." She tried to smile, but Nolan noticed the paleness of her face and the slight tremble in her hands. Even though he was concerned, he respected his grandmother's wishes. He knew insisting would only make her more stubborn. But throughout the morning, while he set up the fruit and vegetable stand, his thoughts kept drifting back to Grandma Helena. What if it was something serious? He could barely focus on the few customers that morning, as a strong wind began to hint at an approaching storm. In the early afternoon, after closing the stand early due to the bad weather, Nolan returned home with a heavy heart. An unsettling feeling had followed him the entire way. When he entered the house, he found Grandma Helena lying on the couch, her eyes half closed and her breathing labored. "Grandma!" He rushed to her side, kneeling next to the couch. Grandma Helena seemed to be in pain, her skin even paler than in the morning, and her hands were cold. "Nolan, I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Nolan felt panic rising inside him. Without a second thought, he ran to the phone, his fingers trembling as he dialed the number of the nearest hospital. Every second of waiting felt like an eternity. "My grandmother, she's very ill. Please, we need an ambulance." His voice came out more desperate than he intended. He quickly gave the dispatcher all the necessary information and rushed back to Grandma Helena. He held her hand, squeezing it gently. The coldness of her skin only heightened his fear. "It's going to be okay, Grandma. They're on their way, all right? Hang in there." Grandma Helena slowly opened her eyes, her face marked with pain, but a faint smile appeared on her lips. "You've always been such a good boy, Nolan. I'm so proud of you," she said with difficulty. "Never forget that." Nolan couldn't hold back the tears welling up in his eyes. He tried to stay calm, but the thought of losing the only person he had in his life was terrifying. She was his only family, his protector, the one who loved him unconditionally. Finally, the sound of the ambulance siren broke the stillness of the afternoon. The paramedics quickly entered the house, assessed Grandma Helena and placed her on the stretcher. Nolan stayed by her side the entire time, refusing to let go of her hand. On the way to the hospital, the noise of the storm outside mirrored the turmoil inside Nolan. The wind whipped against the ambulance, and the torrential rain made it hard to see the road. He kept his eyes on his grandmother, struggling to hold back the tears, while his mind filled with questions. Would she survive? How could he live without her? When they arrived at the hospital, everything happened quickly. Grandma Helena was rushed into the emergency room, and Nolan was left in the waiting area. He sat down on a hard chair, feeling small and powerless. Outside, the storm seemed to intensify, thunder echoing like hammers in his chest, while the rain pounded violently against the windows. Every minute felt like an eternity. The constant sound of hurried footsteps from nurses and doctors in the corridor did nothing to calm his nerves. The uncertainty was suffocating. What if his grandmother didn't make it? What would become of him? After hours of waiting, a nurse with a serious expression finally approached Nolan. "Are you Helena's grandson?" she asked, and Nolan nodded, eager for news. "Your grandmother is stable for now. We've managed to stabilize her, but her condition is delicate. We need to run more tests and it seems she'll need surgery." "Surgery?" Nolan felt a knot form in his stomach. "Is she going to be okay?" The nurse hesitated, clearly choosing her words carefully. "We'll do everything we can, but the surgery is urgent and will be expensive." Nolan could barely process the word expensive. He knew they barely had enough money for daily expenses. A surgery? How was he supposed to pay for something like that? Despair washed over him again. Selling fruits and vegetables by the roadside wasn't enough to save his grandmother's life. Sitting again in the waiting room, Nolan looked down at his empty hands. Outside, the storm raged on, but the chaos inside him was even greater. He wanted to be strong, as he had always tried to be, but now it felt like the world was falling apart. The grandmother he loved was in a hospital bed, and he had no way to help her. He closed his eyes, trying to hold back the tears. He was alone, and for the first time, the future seemed frighteningly empty. Nolan felt the cold of the cement floor through the worn soles of his shoes as he walked away from the hospital, his head down and heart heavy. Grandma Helena was still hospitalized, and he didn't know if she would survive. The words "expensive surgery" echoed in his mind, an insurmountable barrier. With no one else to turn to and no money, the situation felt hopeless. Days later, reality proved even harsher. Without his grandmother at home and unable to care for himself, Nolan was sent to a local orphanage. The feeling of emptiness and abandonment clung to him as the social worker drove him to his new home. When they arrived, the orphanage looked even more depressing under the grey sky. It was an old building, with faded walls and windows that creaked as the wind pushed against them. Children ran through the courtyard, some laughing, others just watching from afar, curious about the arrival of the new boy. "Welcome, Nolan," said the director, a woman with a stern face but a hidden kindness in her eyes. "We know your situation isn't easy, but we're here to help." Nolan only nodded, still feeling the emptiness of being away from his grandmother. He was shown to his room, where 3 simple beds awaited him. The walls bore the marks of time, and the smell of mildew was faint but present. Despite this, the place wasn't entirely unwelcoming. Some of the boys who lived there smiled, trying to include Nolan in their conversations. But Nolan couldn't feel like he belonged there. All he wanted was to be with Grandma Helena, to see her recover. But now he was stuck here, unsure of how to move forward. In the days that followed, Nolan tried to adjust to life at the orphanage. He met Mr. Jerome, the man in charge of the garden. He was a kind old man, with calloused hands and a sunburned face, who tended the small patch of land that the orphanage had. He spent hours there, working silently, until one day Nolan, not knowing what else to do, approached him. "Can I help?" Nolan asked, watching Mr. Jerome turn the soil with a hoe. The man looked at him, surprised by the offer, but soon smiled. "Help is always welcome, boy. If you like working with the land, I'll teach you a few things." From that day on, Nolan started helping in the garden. The hard work kept him busy and distracted him from his painful thoughts. He learned how to plant, water, and harvest. The garden provided vegetables and fruits used to feed the orphans, and in some cases were sold at the local market to raise money for the orphanage. The silence between Nolan and Mr. Jerome was comfortable, and over time the old gardener began to share his stories. He had lost his family many years ago, and like Nolan, had found purpose in working the land. "We always need a reason to keep going," Mr. Jerome said one day while pulling weeds. "The land gives me that. Maybe it'll help you too, boy." Nolan listened to those words and, little by little, started to feel that even in a place he didn't want to be, something inside him was changing. There was a small hope growing, like the seeds he planted. But at the same time, he knew he needed something bigger. He wanted to become a doctor. That dream still lived inside him, but it seemed distant, almost impossible given the circumstances. Then, one Sunday afternoon, while Nolan was helping harvest some fruits, Mr. Jerome made an unexpected proposal. "You know, Nolan, the market in town always needs fresh produce. I see how hard you work here. What do you think about taking some of these fruits to sell there? It's against the orphanage's rules, but I trust you. No one needs to know, and you can keep the money." Nolan's eyes widened. It was an opportunity, not only to earn some money but also to start forging his own path. He could use the money to study, maybe even help pay for his grandmother's surgery, if she still had a chance. I would love that," Nolan replied, trying to contain his excitement. "Thank you so much, Mr. Juan." From that moment on, Nolan began selling fruits in secret on Sundays at the town market. He woke up early, before the other boys at the orphanage were awake, and quietly carried the fruits they had harvested the day before. The market was a vibrant place, full of colors and aromas, and Nolan, with his humility and charm, quickly earned the trust of the vendors. At the end of the day, Nolan saved every penny he earned, always with the same thought in mind. One day he would become a doctor. The vendors, moved by the boy's determination, began supporting his dream. Sometimes they would buy what he couldn't sell, claiming they needed extra fruit, but Nolan knew it was a gesture of generosity. The days at the orphanage continued, and Nolan kept saving his money in secret. He thought of Grandma Helena every day, praying for her recovery. Even without news, he held on to the hope that somehow he would be able to help her. Mr. Juan, always observant, noticed something special in the boy. "You've got a rare determination, Nolan. Keep it up, you'll go far." Nolan wasn't sure if he would, but at that moment, he had a reason to keep fighting. Despite the sadness, a small spark of hope was beginning to light his path. It was a spring afternoon, the sun shining gently in the sky, and the orphanage was bustling with a special event. A group of donors was visiting, and all the children were excited. Nolan, however, felt out of place. He didn't like the attention that events like these brought, preferring the quiet of the garden and the discreet work he did on Sundays at the market. But today, he knew he had to be present. As the children gathered in the courtyard, Nolan leaned against a tree, watching from a distance. Soft music played in the background as the visitors toured the orphanage, admiring the facilities and chatting with the staff. He kept to himself, with no expectations. Then something unexpected happened. Among the crowd of adults and children, a girl walked past him, and Nolan felt as if time had stopped for a moment. Those eyes, that face. Luna. She looked much healthier, her cheeks rosy and her hair neatly arranged. Nothing like the disoriented girl he had helped months earlier on the roadside. Nolan froze for a moment, trying to process what he was seeing. Luna, on the other hand, was looking around distractedly until her gaze finally met Nolan's. For a second she hesitated, her eyes widening in surprise, and then with a wave of emotion, she ran towards him. "Nolan!" she exclaimed, unable to contain her joy. Before he could say anything, Luna wrapped him in a tight hug. Nolan, caught off guard, stood still for a few seconds, then slowly raised his arms and hugged her back. His heart raced, a mix of shock and happiness flooding him. "I knew I'd find you again someday," Luna said, her voice filled with emotion. "You saved me that day on the road. I'll never forget what you did for me." Nolan felt a warm rush through his chest. The memory of that day came back strongly. He had often wondered what had happened to Luna after she was taken by the police. Seeing her well, healthy, and so grateful brought a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. "It was nothing," he murmured shyly, still trying to process the reunion. But for Luna, it was far from nothing. She turned to a man watching the scene from afar. He had an imposing presence, with a curious expression on his face. Dr. Edward, Luna's father, one of the most respected doctors in the region. Luna ran to him, excitedly explaining who Nolan was. "Dad, this is the boy who saved my life that day. He gave me fruit when I was so sick. If it weren't for him, I don't know what would have happened." Dr. Edward looked at Nolan with a mix of surprise and gratitude. He walked over to the boy and extended his hand. "So, you're Nolan?" the doctor said in a deep but kind voice. "My daughter has spoken about you many times. I don't even know how to thank you for helping Luna that day." Nolan, embarrassed, shook the man's hand, but couldn't find much to say. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, and the idea that he had saved someone still felt distant to him. Dr. Edward continued to study Nolan, as if something about him piqued his interest even more. He seemed intrigued, not just by Luna's story, but by something deeper. "You live here at the orphanage?" the doctor asked, glancing around. "Yes," Nolan replied, hesitating. "My grandmother is in the hospital. She got very sick. I don't have anyone else, so they brought me here." The mention of his grandmother stirred even more curiosity in Dr. Edward. He knew well the state of the orphanages and hospitals in the region and had dealt with many tough cases in his career, but this boy's story seemed even more delicate. "And how is your grandmother now?" Nolan looked down at the ground, the weight of the situation returning to his chest. "She needs surgery, but we don't have the money for it. They said it's expensive. I don't know what to do." Dr. Edward remained silent for a moment, his eyes evaluating the boy standing before him. He saw the determination in Nolan, something rare to find, especially in young people facing so many challenges. "You have a good heart, Nolan," the doctor said after a pause. "Not only did you save my daughter, but you're facing your own difficult situation with a strength that few people have. I'm going to help you." Nolan lifted his eyes, incredulous at what he had just heard. "I'm going to arrange your grandmother's surgery, and besides that," Dr. Edward continued, smiling slightly, "I want you to keep studying. Luna told me you dream of becoming a doctor. With your heart and dedication, you can be one of the best." The boy stood frozen. Dr. Edward's words echoed in his mind like a dream he never thought could come true. The help he so desperately needed for both his grandmother and his future was now right in front of him, and all because of a simple act of kindness on the side of the road. Luna smiled at him, happy to see him finally receiving the recognition he deserved. Nolan felt his eyes welling up with tears, but this time it wasn't sadness. It was a different emotion, something he had almost forgotten. Hope. "Thank you," was all he could manage to say, his voice choked with emotion. Dr. Edward placed a firm yet comforting hand on Nolan's shoulder. "You deserve it, son. And don't worry, from now on I'll be here for you." For the first time in a long while, Nolan felt his life, once so full of uncertainty and hardship, begin to change. And it all started with a simple act of kindness. The circle was complete. He had saved a life, and now his own life was about to be transformed. The days following the reunion with Luna and her father, Dr. Edward, were a whirlwind of emotions for Nolan. It was as if the heavy burden on his shoulders had lightened. He wasn't alone anymore. There was hope, and for the first time in a long while, the future didn't seem so frightening. Dr. Edward kept his promise. Within a few days, Grandma Helena's situation became a priority. Nolan couldn't hold back his tears when he found out that his grandmother would undergo surgery. The fear he had felt while watching her fade away in the hospital was replaced by overwhelming relief. The surgeon in charge was none other than Dr. Edward, who on top of everything covered the costs of the procedure. The care and concern the doctor showed for Nolan's grandmother touched the boy deeply. On the day of the surgery, Nolan sat nervously in the hospital waiting room, but for the first time there was a new feeling, hope. He knew his grandmother was in the best hands possible, and that calmed him, even though anxiety still churned in his stomach. He thought of the moments they had shared, the laughter and conversations, and wished with all his heart that she would have more time to live. More time for them to create new memories together. Time seemed to drag on as Nolan glanced repeatedly at the clock. The hurried footsteps of nurses and doctors echoed through the halls, and for a moment, everything felt like the chaos of when his grandmother had first fallen ill. But this time he wasn't alone. Dr. Edward, who occasionally stopped by the waiting room to reassure Nolan, remained calm and confident. Finally, after what felt like days, the surgery ended. Dr. Edward, with a gentle smile on his face, approached Nolan. "Everything went well, Nolan. Your grandmother will need time to recover, but she's out of danger." The boy felt such a deep sense of relief that his knees nearly gave out. The gratitude he felt was so overwhelming that he could hardly find the words. Grandma Helena was saved. I don't even know how to thank you, Dr. Edward," Nolan said, his eyes filling with tears. You saved my grandmother's life." Dr. Edward looked at the boy with understanding and pride. "You already did your part when you saved my daughter's life, Nolan. Now it's my turn to give back." He paused, studying the young man in front of him. "But beyond that, there's something about you, something that makes me believe you can go much further. The world needs more people like you." Nolan was surprised by his words. To feel valued by someone so important was new to him. And hearing that he had the potential to become a doctor made the dream that once seemed unreachable feel much closer. It was the kind of encouragement he never imagined receiving from such a respected figure. "I know life hasn't been easy for you," Dr. Edward continued, "but don't let the difficulties extinguish your dreams. If you really want to become a doctor, I can help you, not just with studies, but with guidance and opportunities. You have something special, Nolan, and I want to see you realize that potential." Nolan remained silent for a few moments, absorbing everything he had just heard. The weight of Dr. Edward's words settled on him, a mixture of emotion and responsibility. He knew that becoming a doctor was his greatest dream, and now he had a real chance to make it come true. But he also knew the road ahead would be tough. "I want to be a doctor," Nolan said, his voice firm. "I want to help people just like you helped me. I want to make a difference." Dr. Edward smiled, pleased with the boy's determination. "And you will succeed, Nolan. I'll be by your side to make sure of it." Nolan spent the following days by his grandmother's side, who, although still weak, showed clear signs of improvement. Every time he entered the hospital room and saw Grandma Helena awake, his eyes sparkled with relief and love. She still had a long road to recovery, but the worst was behind them. One afternoon, as Nolan sat by her side, holding her hand, Grandma Helena looked at him with a tired but tender smile. "You've always been my hope, Nolan. Ever since you were little, I knew you would do great things. I knew you had a special heart." Nolan gently squeezed her hand, trying to hold back the emotion rising in his throat. "And you've always been my strength, Grandma. Everything I am is because of you." Grandma Helena smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. She knew Nolan was growing up, and that his future was bright, but she also knew he would face challenges bigger than he could ever imagine. Yet something inside her told her he was ready, that he had the strength to face whatever came his way. "No matter what happens," she said softly, "never lose your kindness. That's your greatest gift to the world." Nolan nodded, feeling the weight of her words. The kindness he carried had guided him this far, and now he knew it would be his greatest ally on the journey to achieving his dreams. When Grandma Helena was finally discharged and returned home, Dr. Edward remained a constant presence in Nolan's life. He frequently visited the fruit and vegetable stand after his shifts, buying produce as a gesture of gratitude, but also as a symbol of their growing friendship and mutual respect. The bond between them deepened. Nolan continued helping with the orphanage's garden, selling fruits at the market on Sundays, and every coin he saved had one purpose: to study and become a doctor. The road would be long and difficult, but now he knew he wasn't alone. He had his grandmother, Dr. Edward, and an unshakable determination guiding him. The fresh morning breeze rustled the leaves of the trees as Nolan arranged the fruits at his grandmother's stand. Grandma Helena, still fragile, sat beside him, smiling as she watched her grandson care for the small stall. Although her body was still recovering, her spirit was light. The surgery had been a success, and the life that once seemed full of uncertainties now carried a glimpse of hope. Nolan looked down the dirt road with a new feeling. He had spent so much time there, waiting for customers, thinking about the future, wondering what his life would be like. Now something had changed. He had a purpose, a dream that once seemed impossible, but was now slowly becoming a reality. Every Sunday, he still sold fruits and vegetables at the city market. The vendors, always generous, continued to buy his produce, knowing his determination to save money for his studies. They knew about Nolan's dream of becoming a doctor and made sure to support him whenever they could. The market wasn't just a place to make a living, it was a symbol of his persistence and how a simple act of kindness had sparked a series of life-changing events. During the week, Nolan continued studying harder than ever, True to his promise, Dr. Edward was always there, guiding him with books, conversations, and encouragement. He would take Nolan to the hospital occasionally to show him the environment, giving him a glimpse of the future he so desperately wanted. Each visit strengthened his desire to become a doctor and help others just as he had helped Luna. Months passed, and the routine at the orphanage also began to change. Nolan was now known as the boy who wanted to be a doctor, and his kindness and dedication spread among the staff and children. Mr. Juan, always observant, watched with pride as the boy grew, knowing he was on the right path. One day, the orphanage organized a big event, a celebration to thank the donors and supporters of the institution. It was an opportunity for the orphans to showcase their talents and for the community to recognize the importance of the place. As always, Nolan stayed away from the spotlight, but that afternoon something special was about to happen. Luna appeared again, this time accompanied by Dr. Edward. She smiled when she saw Nolan and quickly ran to hug him. There was now a strong friendship between them, a connection that could never be broken. They had started this journey together, and Luna would always be grateful for what Nolan had done for her. But that afternoon it was Dr. Edward who had something more important to say. "Nolan," the doctor said, approaching with his usual gentle smile, "we have a surprise for you." Nolan, always humble, furrowed his brow, curious and a bit wary. He never expected anything in return for his kindness. "A surprise?" he asked, unsure of what was happening. Dr. Edward nodded but paused, glancing at the other donors present at the event. He then pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to Nolan. "This is the result of your hard work, Nolan. Everyone here has recognized your dedication, your generous heart, and your dream of becoming a doctor. That's why we've decided it's time for you to take the next step." Nolan opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter of acceptance for a full scholarship to a prestigious pre-medical preparatory school. He could hardly believe what he was reading. His eyes scanned the page again, as if he needed to confirm that it was real. I did it," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Dr. Edward smiled, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You didn't just do it, Nolan. You earned this. Everyone here believes in your potential. This is only the beginning of your journey." Nolan couldn't hold back the tears. He had faced so many hardships, so many moments of doubt and fear, but now he stood before the realization of a dream that once seemed so far away. The kindness he had shown on that road, helping a stranger, had changed everything. The vendors who had bought his fruit, Mr. Juan with his patient guidance in the garden, Dr. Edward and Luna, and even his grandmother, everyone had been a part of his transformation. They had believed in him when he had struggled to believe in himself. And now, with the letter in his hands, Nolan could finally see that the future was within his reach. That night, Grandma Helena hugged him tightly, her voice filled with pride as she told him how proud she was of him. Nolan felt the warmth of her embrace, knowing that everything he did was for her, for all the love she had given him over the years. She was his strength, his reason to keep going. From that day forward, Nolan's life took a new path. He continued to work hard, both at the market and in his studies, but now with even greater focus. The doors were opening, and he was ready to walk through them. Dr. Edward remained a constant presence, guiding Nolan and ensuring he had everything he needed to succeed. He knew that the boy who had started out as an orphan selling fruit would become something much greater, and Nolan, with his heart full of gratitude and determination, was more than ready for the challenge. Looking back, Nolan understood that his success didn't come from grand heroic deeds, but from small acts of kindness and perseverance. Every decision, every act of generosity, and every difficult moment faced with courage had shaped the young man he had become. And now he was ready to fulfill his dream, knowing that no matter what the future held, his kindness and determination would always be his greatest tools. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more touching stories like this one. Your support helps us share more meaningful content. Thank you for watching.
An insensitive millionaire calls a job applicant who missed her interview, and what a little girl says leaves him in tears. Before anything else, if you're watching this from a place of struggle, know that you're not alone. drop a heart. Maxwell Pierce slammed his fist on the polished mahogany desk, sending a wave of tension through his corner office on the 47th floor. The Manhattan skyline stretched out behind him, a testament to the empire he'd built from nothing. Unacceptable, he growled, glaring at the resume in front of him. Completely unprofessional. Margaret, his executive assistant of 15 years, stood stoically by the door. She'd seen these outbursts before. The woman didn't even call to cancel Margaret. This was a senior marketing position. A courtesy call would have been the bare minimum. Perhaps something came up, Margaret suggested carefully. Ms. Mitchell's references were exemplary. Maxwell scoffed. Something more important than a job. Interview at Pierce Enterprises? I doubt it. He ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair. At 45, Maxwell had built a billion-dollar technology company, but the cost had been high. No family, few friends, and a reputation as a brilliant but merciless businessman. Give me her number, he demanded suddenly. I want to tell her personally that this kind of unprofessionalism doesn't fly in New York. Margaret hesitated. Max, is that really necessary? The number, Margaret. His tone left no room for argument. With a resigned sigh, Margaret handed over the contact information for Sarah Mitchell. Maxwell punched the numbers into his phone, rehearsing the cutting remarks he would deliver. The phone rang 3 times before a small voice answered. Hello? Maxwell paused, thrown off by the distinctly childlike voice. I'm trying to reach Sarah. Mitchell, he said, his professional tone automatically softening. Mommy can't come to the phone, the little voice replied. She's crying in the bathroom. Something in Maxwell's chest tightened. Is she okay? She's sad because she missed the important meeting today, the child explained with disarming honesty. But we didn't have any food, and she had to go to the food bank before it closed. She said the job would have fixed everything. Maxwell felt the air leave his lungs. His prepared speech evaporated. What's your name? He asked quietly. Emily. I'm 6. There was a pause. Are you the important man Mommy was supposed to meet? She has your picture from the computer. Yes, I'm Maxwell Pierce. The girl gasped. You're the man in Mommy's special box. She has pictures of you and papers with your name. Maxwell frowned, confused. What kind of papers? Grown-up papers. And a picture of you at the beach. Mommy says you're my daddy, but you're too busy for us. The world seemed to tilt around Maxwell. What did you say? He whispered, his knuckles white around the phone. Are you really my daddy? Emily asked, her voice suddenly hopeful. Will you come see us now? Mommy says you're the smartest, richest man in New York. She says, I have your eyes. Maxwell's hand shook as he reached for his desk chair, missing it entirely, and sinking to his knees on the plush carpet. That's not possible, he said more to himself than to the child. I can't have children. The bathroom door creaked open in the background. Emily? Who are you talking to? A woman's panicked voice came through the line. It's my daddy. Mommy, he called us. The phone clattered, and Maxwell heard a gasp, followed by Sarah's voice, tight with emotion. Mr. Pierce, I can explain everything. But Maxwell couldn't respond. Tears streamed down his face as 30 years of certainty crumbled around him. The world's most ruthless CEO, brought to his knees by 6 simple words. Mommy says you're my daddy. Maxwell's executive suite fell silent after the call ended. He sat motionless behind his desk, staring at the phone as if it might explain what had just happened. Margaret had quietly slipped away, sensing he needed space. Impossible, he whispered. The memory surged back, a doctor's office 15 years ago, the grim-faced specialist confirming his sterility after a childhood illness, the medical certainty that had shaped his life choices. His computer chimed with an incoming email from Margaret, Sarah Mitchell's complete file. Maxwell clicked through the documents with trembling fingers. Resume, References, background check. And there it was, a note about a 6-year-old daughter. He searched Sarah Mitchell and scanned through social media accounts until he found her. His breath caught. The woman looked vaguely familiar, a ghost from his past. And beside her in several photos was Emily, a little girl with his steel blue eyes and characteristic dimple. Maxwell's mind raced back 7 years to the tech conference in San Diego. 3 days of networking, 1 night of unexpected connection with a brilliant young software developer, Sarah. They'd spent 1 passionate weekend together before he returned to New York. She'd tried contacting him afterward, but his assistant had blocked her calls as per standard protocol with Maxwell's. Brief entanglements. "Call my car," he barked into the intercom. Within minutes, Maxwell was speeding through Manhattan traffic toward the Bronx address in Sarah's file. The neighborhood was a stark contrast to his penthouse world. Children played on cracked sidewalks, while tired-looking adults trudged home. From long work days, Maxwell felt conspicuously out of place as his luxury car crawled down the street. He found the apartment building, a worn brick structure with peeling paint. Taking a deep breath, he approached the buzzer for Unit 4B. His finger hovered over the button. What would he say? What could he say? If Emily truly was his daughter, the possibility sent equal waves of terror and wonder through him. The building. A door suddenly swung open as a tenant exited. Maxwell caught it reflexively and stepped inside. The lobby smelled of cabbage and disinfectant. He climbed 4 flights of stairs, his designer shoes echoing in the stairwell. Outside 4B, he paused again, straightening his tie and running a hand through his hair. Then he knocked. Footsteps approached, light and quick. The door opened a crack, secured by a chain, revealing a slice of a woman's face. Her eyes widened. "Mr. Pierce?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "We need to talk," Maxwell said, his customary authority faltering. The door closed, the chain rattled, and then it opened. Fully. Sarah Mitchell stood before him, older than in his hazy memory, her face lined with exhaustion, but still striking. Behind her peered a small face with familiar blue eyes. "Are you really my daddy?" Emily asked. Maxwell Pierce, the man who controlled. Boardrooms with a glance found himself speechless. The apartment was small, but meticulously organized. Textbooks stacked on a side table suggested Sarah was studying. A makeshift office occupied one corner, a laptop surrounded by programming manuals. The kitchen counters were bare, except for a single box of cereal. "Emily, sweetheart," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tension radiating from her. "Can you please go play in your room for a few minutes while I talk to Mr. Pierce?" "But, Mommy, please, Em, just for a little while." The girl's eyes darted between them before she reluctantly retreated, closing her bedroom door with a pointed look at Maxwell. "You should sit." Sarah gestured to a worn sofa. "This isn't a conversation to have standing." Maxwell remained upright. "Is she mine?" The question hung between them, stark and demanding. Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "Yes." "That's impossible. I can't have children." "Medical fact." She laughed bitterly. "Apparently, medical facts can be wrong." "You never told me?" "I tried for months. Your assistant blocked my calls. My emails went unanswered. Eventually, I got the message." Maxwell paced the small living room. "I need a DNA test." "Fine." Sarah crossed her arms. "I've got nothing to hide. I never asked you for anything, Maxwell. We've managed on our own." "Clearly," he said, glancing around the humble apartment. The remark came out more condescending than intended. Sarah's expression hardened. "We don't need your money or your judgment. Emily asked about you, so I told her the truth, that her father was successful, but not in our lives. I never said a bad word about you." A drawing on the refrigerator caught Maxwell's eye, a child's rendering of a family. A small figure labeled "Me," a taller one labeled "Mom," and a third figure with a crown and dollar signs labeled Dad in NY. Something cracked inside Maxwell's chest. "I'll arrange for the test tomorrow," he said, his voice oddly thick, "but I want to meet her properly." "Now, if that's okay," surprise flickered across Sarah's face, softening her anger. "You do?" Before Maxwell could answer, Emily's door cracked open. "Are you done talking about me yet?" Sarah smiled faintly. "Come meet Mr. Pierce properly, Emily." The little girl approached cautiously, studying him with an intensity that mirrored his own boardroom scrutiny. She extended her small hand formally. "I'm Emily Mitchell. I'm in first grade and I'm good at math." Maxwell knelt slowly, meeting her at eye level, and took her tiny hand in his. "I'm Maxwell Pierce. I'm good at math too." Her face lit up. "Can you do fractions? We're learning those." The penthouse felt emptier than usual as Maxwell paced across Italian marble floors. 3 days had passed since the DNA test. 3 days of sleepless nights and distracted meetings. Today the results would arrive. His phone rang, the private line reserved for his lawyer. "It's confirmed, Max," said Arthur Weinstein, his attorney of 20 years. 99.99998% probability of paternity. She's your daughter." Maxwell sank onto the nearest chair. "How is this possible, Arthur?" "The doctors said medical miracles happen, or medical errors. Either way, you have a 6-year-old daughter. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" What indeed? Maxwell had built his empire on decisive action, but this situation defied his usual approach. "I need to see them again," he said finally. An hour later, Maxwell sat across from Sarah at a quiet cafe near her apartment. They'd agreed to meet while Emily was in school. The test confirmed it, Maxwell said without preamble. Sarah nodded. "I never doubted it. I want to be part of her life." The words surprised him as much as they did Sarah. "Just like that? You'll sweep in after 6 years and play daddy?" Her voice held both skepticism and hope. "I missed 6 years I can never get back," Maxwell said quietly. "I don't want to miss any more." Sarah studied him carefully. "This isn't a business acquisition, Maxwell. You can't just decide you want her and take over. Emily has a life, routines, feelings." "I understand that. Do you?" "Because the Maxwell Pierce, I remember, wasn't exactly known for his emotional intelligence." The comment stung, because it was true. "People can change." "Can they?" Sarah leaned forward. "Why do you want this?" "Really? Because she's suddenly yours, another possession, or because you actually care about her well-being?" Maxwell considered the question honestly. The revelation had shaken him profoundly. Something had awakened within him, something he'd never known existed. "When I heard her voice on the phone," he said slowly, "something happened to me. I can't explain it. Then when I saw her, those eyes, my mother's eyes," he swallowed hard. "I've achieved everything I ever wanted, Sarah. Everything except the things I convinced myself I couldn't have. A family." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "Emily asks about you. Has for years." "What do you tell her?" "That her father is a very important man who doesn't know about her. I never wanted her to think you rejected her." Maxwell felt a surge of gratitude toward this woman who'd raised his child alone without bitterness. "What do you need?" he asked. "Both of you?" Sarah laughed softly. "That's such a CEO question. We're not a problem to solve, Maxwell." "I didn't mean it that way," he said, frustration edging his voice. "I want to help. Emily needs stability, consistency, a father who shows up not just financially but emotionally. Can you provide that, truly?" The playground bustled with activity as Maxwell watched Emily swing higher and higher, her laughter carrying across the park. It was their 3rd weekend together, a tentative routine they'd established with Sarah's cautious blessing. "Higher, Max! Push me higher!" Emily called. He still felt strange hearing her call him Max instead of Daddy. But Sarah had suggested they take things slowly, Emily knew he was her father, but building that relationship would take time. "Not too high, monkey," he cautioned, giving another gentle push. The nickname had slipped out naturally during their first outing, and Emily had beamed with delight. From a bench nearby, Sarah observed them, her expression a complex mixture of emotions. Their own relationship remained cordial but guarded. Too much history, too many unspoken words between them. "Max," Emily said as the swing slowed, "why don't you live with us?" Maxwell froze. He'd been dreading this question. "Well, grown-ups sometimes have complicated living arrangements. Tommy's dad lives somewhere else too, but now he's back home. His mom says they're trying again." Maxwell carefully helped her off the swing. "Every family is different, Emily, but I'll always be your dad, no matter where I live. Promise? I promise?" The solemnity in her eyes nearly undid him. Later, as Emily played with another child on the jungle gym, Maxwell joined Sarah on the bench. "She's asking questions," he said quietly. Sarah nodded. "I expected she would. I'm not sure I'm answering them right. There are no perfect answers, just honest ones." She hesitated. "You're doing better than I expected." Coming from Sarah, this qualified as high praise. Maxwell felt an unexpected warmth spread through his chest. "I've been thinking," he ventured. "Your apartment." Sarah stiffened immediately. "We don't need your charity." "It's not charity to want your child to live somewhere safe. The building's infrastructure is concerning, Sarah. Last weekend the elevator wasn't working, and the week before there was that water leak. We manage. You shouldn't have to just manage. Not when I can help." He softened his tone. "I'm not suggesting anything dramatic. Maybe a better apartment in the same neighborhood. Emily wouldn't have to change schools." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching Emily play. "I've applied to a coding boot camp," she finally said. "If I get in, it could change everything for us. Better job, better future." "That's fantastic. When do you find out?" "Next week. But the program is full-time for 3 months. I'd have to quit my current job, and with childcare costs." She shook her head. Maxwell saw the opening. "Let me help with that, not forever, just while you're in the program. Consider it an investment in Emily's future." Sarah's pride warred visibly with practicality. "I'll think about it." A shriek of laughter drew their attention. Emily was being chased by a boy around the jungle gym, her face alight with joy. "She looks like my mother when she smiles," Maxwell said softly. "I have photos I could show you sometime." Sarah turned to him, really looking at him perhaps for the first time. "I'd like to see those. Emily would too." Something shifted between them in that moment. Not forgiveness exactly, but the first fragile bridge spanning years of absence. "Max, watch me," Emily called, preparing to go down the slide. Both adults turned to watch their daughter, this miracle neither had expected, as she launched herself down the plastic slide with complete abandonment, trusting they would both be there when she landed. The hospital corridor seemed to stretch endlessly before Maxwell as he ran, his heart pounding against his ribs. The call had come during a board meeting, Sarah's voice tight with panic. "Emily's collapsed. We're at Mount Sinai Children's." He burst through the emergency department doors, his usual composure shattered. "Emily Mitchell," he gasped to the receptionist. "I'm her father." The words still felt new on his tongue, but in this moment they were the most important identity he possessed. A nurse directed him to a curtained area where he found Sarah standing pale-faced beside a bed where Emily lay connected to monitors, her small form unnervingly still. "What happened?" he demanded, more harshly than intended. Sarah's composure cracked. "She fainted at school. They couldn't wake her up right away." Her voice broke. "The doctors are running tests." Maxwell moved to Emily's side, taking her limp hand in his. 2 months into his new role as father, and already he couldn't imagine life without her weekly visits, her morning phone calls, her drawings that now adorned his refrigerator. "Mr. Pierce? Miss Mitchell?" A doctor appeared, clutching a tablet. "I'm Dr. Winters. We have some preliminary results." The next few minutes blurred as medical terminology washed over them. Words like anomaly and further testing stood out starkly, against phrases that made Maxwell's blood run cold. Kidney function and genetic condition. "Genetic," Maxwell interrupted. "You mean she inherited this?" Dr. Winters nodded. "This particular condition can be hereditary. We'll need family medical histories from both parents." "That's impossible," Maxwell said automatically. "I was told I couldn't have children due to a childhood illness." The doctor frowned. "What illness specifically?" "Mumps, complicated by orchitis. I was 14. Dr. Winters typed something into his tablet. "That typically reduces fertility, but rarely causes complete sterility. More importantly, it wouldn't cause this condition." He looked up. "However, this might explain why you were told you couldn't have children." A nurse appeared with more test results, and the doctor stepped away to review them. Sarah turned to Maxwell, her eyes wide. "They said it might be serious." For the first time in his adult life, Maxwell felt completely powerless. His wealth, his influence, his carefully constructed empire, none of it could protect the small girl lying in the hospital bed. "She'll be okay," he said, the words hollow even to his own ears. "I'll make sure of it. Whatever specialists we need, whatever treatments, this isn't something you can fix by throwing money at it, Maxwell." Sarah's voice cracked. "This is our daughter. Our daughter." The phrase hung between them, both an accusation and a connection. Dr. Winters returned, his expression grave. "We need to transfer Emily to our specialized pediatric unit. Her condition is more serious than we initially thought." "What exactly is wrong with her?" Maxwell demanded. "She has a rare condition called Alport syndrome. It's affecting her kidneys. We need to start treatment immediately and monitor her closely." "Will she?" Sarah couldn't finish the question. "With proper care, many patients lead full lives, but she'll need specialized treatment, possibly for life, and eventually—" "Eventually what?" Maxwell pressed. "Eventually she may need a kidney transplant." The word transplant echoed in Maxwell's mind as he looked down at Emily's pale face, his daughter, his responsibility, the child he never knew he wanted until she existed. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said, meeting Sarah's tearful gaze across the bed. "Whatever she needs, we'll face this together." For once Sarah didn't argue. Maxwell's Aston Martin screeched into the hospital parking lot. He'd cut short a meeting with Japanese investors, a deal worth billions, without explanation. Nothing mattered except the text from Sarah. "Emily's tests are back. Doctor wants to talk to both of us." The past month had blurred into hospital visits, specialist consultations, and late-night research sessions. Maxwell had deployed his corporate efficiency to Emily's medical crisis, creating spreadsheets of treatment options and flying in specialists from across the country. He found Sarah in the waiting room, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. Neither spoke as they were led to Dr. Winters' office. "Emily's kidney function is declining faster than we anticipated," the doctor explained gently. "The medications aren't working as effectively as we'd hoped." "What are our options?" Maxwell demanded, falling into negotiation mode. "Long-term, she'll need a transplant, ideally from a family member." "Test me," Maxwell said immediately. Dr. Winters hesitated. "Mr. Pierce, I understand your eagerness, but there are many factors that determine compatibility, and given your own medical history—" "Just test me," Maxwell insisted. "And Sarah too." The doctor nodded. "We'll arrange that. In the meantime, we'll manage her symptoms with medications and dietary restrictions." Later, they stood by Emily's bed as a nurse explained the new medication regimen. Emily listened solemnly, too young to fully understand but old enough to be frightened. "Will I have to take these forever?" she asked. "We hope not, sweetheart," Sarah said, squeezing her hand. "Can I still come to your house this weekend?" Emily asked, turning to Maxwell. He'd been planning to show her the nursery he'd prepared in his penthouse, a room filled with books and toys, walls painted her favorite shade of purple. Their first overnight visit. "Of course you can," he assured her, though he glanced at Sarah for confirmation. Outside Emily's room, they spoke in hushed tones. "I've been researching specialists," Maxwell said. "There's a team in Boston doing groundbreaking work with pediatric kidney disease. I'd like to get their opinion." Sarah nodded wearily. "Whatever helps." Maxwell hesitated. "You know, it would be easier if you both stayed at my place. You wouldn't have to commute to the hospital, and I have." "Plenty of room." "Maxwell," Sarah cut him off. "I appreciate everything you're doing, I do, but we can't just move into your life like that." "Why not? Emily needs stability, you said so yourself." "Yes, but not—" She stopped, composing herself. "This isn't about us. It's about what's best for her. And having her parents together isn't what's best?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications. Sarah looked away. "We're not a couple, Maxwell. We're barely even friends." "We could be," he said quietly. Before she could respond, Emily's nurse approached with paperwork, ending the conversation. That night, alone in his penthouse, Maxwell wandered into the purple bedroom he'd created for his daughter. A sequence of framed pictures lined one wall, photos of Emily from birth to present provided by Sarah, 6 years of a life he'd missed. He picked up a small stuffed rabbit waiting on the perfectly made bed, Emily's favorite animal. Tomorrow he'd bring it to the hospital. His phone rang, his executive assistant, reminding him of the rescheduled investor meeting. "Cancel it," Maxwell said. "Cancel everything for the next week." "Sir?" Margaret's voice registered rare shock. "The board won't be pleased." "The board doesn't matter. Nothing matters except Emily." He ended the call and sat on the edge of the small bed, the stuffed rabbit clutched in his hand, realizing with startling clarity that his definition of success had fundamentally changed. Sarah stared at the business proposal on her laptop, the words blurring together after hours of work. The coding bootcamp she dreamed of attending now seemed impossibly distant. With Emily's condition, she couldn't commit to full-time study. A knock at the apartment door startled her. Maxwell stood outside holding groceries. "You didn't answer your phone," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "It died. I forgot to charge it." Sarah watched as he moved efficiently around her kitchen, unpacking fresh fruits, vegetables, and the specialized low-sodium foods Emily's new diet required. "You need to be reachable," Maxwell said, arranging items in her refrigerator. "I've ordered you a new phone with an extended battery. It'll be delivered tomorrow." Sarah bristled. "I don't need you managing my life, Maxwell." He paused, a container of organic blueberries in hand. In the 2 months since Emily's diagnosis, they'd fallen into an uneasy co-parenting arrangement. Maxwell handled medical costs and used his connections to secure the best care, while Sarah coordinated daily treatments and appointments. "You're right," he conceded. "I'm sorry. Old habits." The simple apology disarmed her. The Maxwell she'd known 7 years ago would never have apologized for anything. "How was Emily today?" he asked, changing subjects. "Tired after dialysis, but she perked up when I mentioned you were coming for dinner." Maxwell smiled. "I brought her favorite ice cream, the special kidney-friendly kind." Sarah watched him move around her kitchen with surprising competence. "When did you learn to cook?" "YouTube," he admitted. "After Emily mentioned she liked chicken parmesan, I had my chef teach me the basics." The image of billionaire Maxwell Pierce taking cooking lessons for a 6-year-old struck Sarah as absurdly touching. As Maxwell prepared dinner, Sarah returned to her laptop. "What are you working on so intently?" he asked, glancing over her shoulder. "A freelance web development project. trying to supplement my income since I had to cut back hours at work for Emily's appointments. Maxwell studied the screen. This is good work. Sarah blinked, surprised by the professional assessment. Thanks. It's just a small business site, but no, I mean it. The code is elegant. He pointed to a section. Though this function could be more efficient. You code? Sarah asked, incredulous. Maxwell smiled wryly. I built Pierce Enterprises on my own programming before I could afford to hire engineers. I still review our core architecture. Sarah had forgotten this aspect of him. The brilliant mind behind the businessman. It was what had attracted her 7 years ago at the tech conference, before she'd discovered the cold ambition that defined the rest of him. The front door opened as Emily returned from her neighbor friend's apartment. Her face lit up when she saw Maxwell. "Max, you came!" She ran to him and he scooped her up carefully, mindful of her recently implanted dialysis port. "Of course I came. I promised, didn't I?" Emily nodded solemnly. "Mum says promises are very important. Your mom is right." Maxwell met Sarah's eyes over Emily's head. Something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of the promises made and broken in their shared past. Later, after Emily had gone to bed, they sat together at the small kitchen table. "I have a proposition," Maxwell said quietly. Sarah tensed. "Maxwell? Not that kind," he clarified quickly. "A professional one. Pierce Enterprises needs contract developers for a new project. Remote work. Flexible hours." Sarah stared at him. "Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you an opportunity. Your coding skills are solid, and you need work that accommodates Emily's schedule. I don't want charity. It's not charity, it's mutually beneficial. You get paid work on your terms, and I get a developer who won't waste time on office politics." Sarah considered the offer, weighing pride against practicality. "I'd report to you," Maxwell shook his head. "To our project lead. You'd be treated like any other contractor." "I'll think about it," she said finally. He nodded, accepting her response. As he prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "Sarah, about what you said at the hospital, that we're not even friends. Could we try to be?" The vulnerability in his question caught her off guard. This wasn't the Maxwell Pierce who dismissed her calls 7 years ago. "For Emily's sake," she agreed cautiously. "We can try." "What do you mean, not compatible?" Maxwell's voice echoed through the consultation room. Dr. Winters sighed. "Neither you nor Ms. Mitchell is a suitable kidney donor match for Emily. Your blood types are compatible, but the tissue typing shows high risk of rejection." 3 months had passed since Emily's diagnosis. Her condition had stabilized with treatment, but the need for a transplant remained inevitable. "There has to be a mistake," Maxwell insisted. "We ran the tests twice," the doctor confirmed. "I'm sorry." Sarah sat quietly, absorbing the news while Maxwell paced like a caged tiger. "So, what now?" she finally asked. "Emily goes on the national transplant list," Dr. Winters explained. "Given her age and condition, she'll have priority, but it could still be months or longer." "Months?" Maxwell's voice rose. "She needs help now." "Her dialysis is managing the symptoms," the doctor reminded him. "Many patients wait years for compatible donors." "Unacceptable," Maxwell snapped, falling back on his familiar corporate coldness. "There must be alternatives." "Extended family members could be tested," Dr. Winters suggested. "Siblings, aunts, uncles, grandparents." "My parents are deceased," Sarah said softly. "I have no siblings." "My father died years ago," Maxwell added. "My mother is in her 70s with health issues of her own." They left the hospital in silence, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on them. In the parking lot, Maxwell turned to Sarah. "Move in with me," he said abruptly. "What? You and Emily? My penthouse has 5 bedrooms. You'd have your own space, privacy. Emily would have a stable environment close to the hospital." Sarah shook her head. "Maxwell, we've discussed this." "This isn't about us," he insisted. "It's about providing the best care for Emily. The commute is wearing you down. You're exhausted." She couldn't deny that. The hours spent on subways between work, home, and hospital had taken their toll. The freelance work for Pierce Enterprises had helped financially, but time remained her scarcest resource. "Just think about it," Maxwell pressed. "For Emily's sake." "I need to get back to her," Sarah said, avoiding a direct answer. That evening, after Emily had fallen asleep in her hospital bed, Sarah stepped into the hallway to call Maxwell. "I've been researching alternative donor programs," he said without greeting. "There's a paired exchange program where incompatible donor-recipient pairs are matched with others in the same situation." "Max, slow down." The doctor said, "Emily's stable for now." "For now isn't good enough," he snapped. "I'm holding a press conference tomorrow." "You're what?" "I'm going public with Emily's condition, appealing for donors. With Pierce Enterprises' platform, we can reach millions." "Without discussing it with me first?" Sarah's voice shook with anger. "She's our daughter, Maxwell, not a publicity stunt." "This isn't about publicity. It's about using every resource I have, including turning our private struggle into public spectacle. Emily deserves dignity, not to be the subject of some billionaire's heartstring-tugging campaign." The silence that followed vibrated with tension. "You still don't trust me," Maxwell finally said, his voice flat. "This isn't about trust. It's about respecting boundaries." Another weighted pause. "Fine, no press conference." After they hung up, Sarah leaned against the cold hospital wall, tears streaming down her face. The emotional toll of the past months crashed over her. The fear for Emily, the complicated feelings resurfacing for Maxwell, the exhaustion of holding everything together. Inside the room, Emily stirred. "Mum, are you crying?" Sarah quickly wiped her eyes and returned to her daughter's side. "Just tired, baby." Emily patted the bed beside her. "You can share my bed. It helps when I'm scared." Sarah slipped beside her daughter, holding her close, wondering how such a small child could possess such immense wisdom. "Is Max coming tomorrow?" Emily asked sleepily. "Yes, sweetheart." "Good. He promised to read me the next Harry Potter chapter." Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead, recognizing that despite their differences, Maxwell had kept every promise he'd made to Emily. Perhaps that counted for something after all. The holiday decorations in the children's ward couldn't mask the sterile hospital environment, but Emily's room had become a riot of color. Artwork covered the walls, stuffed animals crowded her bed, and a small Christmas tree twinkled in the corner. Maxwell's addition. 4 months into Emily's treatment, they'd settled into a rhythm. Maxwell visited daily, often working remotely from Emily's room. Sarah had reluctantly accepted his offer to move into a fully furnished apartment near the hospital. Not his penthouse, but a comfortable space that shortened her commute significantly. Today, Maxwell arrived with a thick folder tucked under his arm, his expression uncharacteristically nervous. "Sarah, can we talk privately?" They stepped into the small waiting area while a nurse checked Emily's vitals. "What is it?" Sarah asked, noticing the dark circles under Maxwell's eyes. He handed her the folder. "I hired a private investigator." "You what?" Sarah's voice rose sharply. "To investigate me." "No, to investigate my medical history." Maxwell ran a hand through his hair, now more grey than black. "Something never added up about my supposed sterility, so I dug deeper." Sarah opened the folder cautiously. Inside were medical records, letters, and legal documents. "My father paid the doctor to lie to me," Maxwell said, his voice hollow. "When I was 14 and developed complications from mumps, he bribed my specialist to tell me I could never have children." Sarah stared at him in disbelief. Why would anyone do that to their child? Control. Maxwell's face hardened. "William Pierce didn't want an heir threatening his empire. He wanted me focused solely on the business, with no distractions like family." "That's monstrous," Sarah whispered. There's more. Maxwell pointed to a specific document. The investigator found my original, unaltered medical records. According to this, I didn't just have mumps. I had a genetic kidney abnormality that went undiagnosed, the same condition that causes Alport syndrome. Sarah gasped. You mean, I'm not just Emily's father. I gave her this condition. His voice cracked with emotion. But it also means I might be able to donate after all. Sarah's mind raced, connecting dots. The tissue compatibility issue might be related to specific antigen markers associated with the condition. I've already contacted Dr. Winters with this information. They're running new tests tomorrow. Sarah sank into a chair, overwhelmed. By implications, you could be her donor. Maxwell nodded, his usual confidence replaced by vulnerable hope. It's why I never got sick, despite working myself to exhaustion. My kidneys have a unique structure, abnormal but functional. The doctor thinks I might be the perfect donor precisely because I carry the same genetic markers. The revelation hung between them, altering everything. Does Emily know? Sarah asked. Not yet. I wanted to tell you first. Sarah studied the man before her, so different from the arrogant CEO who dismissed her years ago. In his face, she saw fear, hope, and determination intermingled. Thank you, she said simply, for not giving up. Maxwell met her gaze. I've spent my life pursuing success, Sarah. I defined it as wealth, power, recognition. But I was wrong. He glanced toward Emily's room. She's my greatest achievement, and I had nothing to do with it. That's on you. You raised an extraordinary child while I was chasing meaningless goals. The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within Sarah, a place she'd guarded carefully against him. Before she could respond, Emily's nurse appeared. She's asking for both of you, the nurse said with a smile. Something about a Christmas list that needs serious discussion. They found Emily sitting up in bed, colored markers spread around her. She beamed at them. Perfect timing. I need help with my list for Santa. Maxwell and Sarah exchanged a look. One of shared purpose, shared hope, and perhaps something more. For the first time, they faced the future not as reluctant co-parents, but as allies in the most important battle of their lives. Snow fell silently outside the hospital window as Maxwell kept his solitary vigil. In the bed beside him, Emily slept, fitfully, her small body dwarfed by machines monitoring her deteriorating condition. The Christmas holiday had come and gone, marked by forced cheer in the pediatric ward and presents opened from a hospital bed. The new tests had confirmed Maxwell's stunning compatibility as a donor, but Emily's health had taken a sudden downturn, delaying the transplant. Her kidney function had plummeted, requiring more aggressive dialysis while doctors worked to stabilize her condition. Maxwell checked his watch. 3:14 a.m. Sarah had finally succumbed to exhaustion around midnight, retreating to the cot in the corner after Maxwell promised to wake her if anything changed. He studied her sleeping form, marveling at her strength through this ordeal. These past 5 months had transformed him in ways his wealth never could. Board meetings and profit margins seemed trivial compared to the numbers that now consumed him. Emily's creatinine levels, blood pressure readings, medication dosages. His phone vibrated with a text from his COO. Board meeting in 4 hours. Presence required for merger vote. Maxwell typed a simple reply. Not coming. Handle it. Then he silenced the device and returned it to his pocket. The old Maxwell would never have delegated such a critical decision, but priorities had shifted. Seismically, Emily stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Max, she whispered. He leaned closer. I'm here, monkey. Need anything? She considered this question with characteristic seriousness. A story? Maxwell smiled. Which one? Harry Potter? She shook her head. Tell me about when you were little. The request caught him off guard. He rarely spoke about his childhood. The cold mansion in Connecticut, the distant father, the mother who'd retreated into pills and alcohol. "Well," he began hesitantly, "when I was about your age, I built my first computer from parts I found at a junkyard." Emily's eyes widened. "By yourself?" "All by myself. My father thought it was a waste of time. He wanted me to study finance, not technology." "Was he mean?" Emily asked, with a child's directness. Maxwell considered how to answer. "He wasn't mean exactly. He just didn't know how to love people properly. He thought success was more important than happiness." "That's silly," Emily declared. "Being happy is the most important thing. That's what Mom always says. Your mom is very wise." Maxwell glanced at Sarah's sleeping form. "I wish I'd listened to her more when we first met." "Did you love her?" Emily's question was innocent but penetrating. Maxwell swallowed hard. "I didn't know how to love anyone then, Emily. I was too busy trying to prove something to my father." "Do you know how to love people now?" The question pierced him deeply. "I'm learning," he answered honestly. "You're teaching me." Emily seemed satisfied with this response. She clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit, the one Maxwell had brought to the hospital months ago. "When I get your kidney, will I be like you?" she asked sleepily. "How do you mean? Will I be good at math and computers?" Maxwell smiled. "You already are, but you're also kind and brave like your mother. That's much more important." Emily's eyelids grew heavy. "Mom says the operation is tomorrow." "If your numbers look good in the morning," Maxwell confirmed, trying to keep his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. The risks of the surgery had been explained in excruciating detail by the transplant team, risks to both Emily and himself. "Are you scared?" Emily asked, reading his thoughts with uncanny perception. "A little," he admitted. "Me too." She reached for his hand. "But Mom says it's okay to be scared as long as you're brave anyway." "Your mom is right about that too." Emily drifted back to sleep, her small fingers intertwined with his. Maxwell continued his vigil, watching the snow fall and contemplating how a 6-year-old girl had accomplished what years of therapy had failed to achieve, breaking through the walls around his heart. Across the room, Sarah opened her eyes, having heard their exchange. Their gazes met in the dim light, a world of unspoken feelings passing between them. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for this moment they were united in love for the child who had brought them together in the most unexpected way. The morning of the transplant surgery dawned bright and cold, sunlight reflecting off, fresh snow that blanketed the city. Maxwell stood at the window of Emily's hospital room, watching the world outside continue its normal rhythm, while his own universe had narrowed to this single day, this critical procedure. Behind him, a team of nurses prepared Emily for surgery, their movements efficient and gentle. Sarah sat beside their daughter, reading her favorite story one more time, a ritual they'd established before every procedure. Mr. Pierce, the transplant coordinator, appeared at his elbow. "It's time for your pre-op." Maxwell nodded, turning back to the room. Emily looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, her dark hair, his hair, fanned out on the pillow. For a moment, fear paralyzed him. What if something went wrong? What if, after finding her, he lost her? "Max," Emily's voice cut through his spiraling thoughts. "Don't forget our deal." He smiled, remembering their conversation from the night before. "I won't forget. Disney World as soon as you're cleared to travel. And Mom comes too," Emily reminded him solemnly. "Of course." Maxwell glanced at Sarah, who managed a tense smile. He approached the bed, heart hammering against his ribs. The business titan who negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat now found himself terrified of a medical procedure that thousands underwent successfully each year. "I'll see you on the other side, monkey," he said, bending to kiss Emily's forehead. "I'll have your kidney and you'll have my stuffed rabbit," she replied, handing him the well-loved toy. "So we both have something of each other's." Maxwell accepted the rabbit, throat tight with emotion. It's a fair trade. As the nurses prepared to wheel Emily to the operating room, Sarah rose to walk alongside the bed. Maxwell hung back, giving them space for their private goodbye. The relationship between mother and daughter, built on 6 years of shared struggles, joys, and unwavering love, was something he observed with equal parts admiration and envy. Sarah approached him after Emily had been taken down the hall. "Your turn," she said, her voice steadier than he expected. Maxwell nodded, clutching the stuffed rabbit. "Sarah, if something happens—" "Don't," she cut him off firmly. "Nothing will happen. You're both coming back." Her certainty steadied him. "I've updated my will anyway. Everything goes to Emily, with you as trustee until she's of age." Sarah's professional composure cracked slightly. "Maxwell, and there's a trust for her education, medical expenses, everything she could need. The paperwork is with my lawyer, Arthur Weinstein. I've left his contact information. Stop planning for your death and start focusing on your recovery." Sarah interrupted, her eyes flashing. "Emily needs you alive, not your money." The words struck him with unexpected force. Emily needed him, not his wealth, not his influence, but him. The revelation still felt new after months of adjustment to fatherhood. Sarah's expression softened. She reached out hesitantly, then pulled him into an unexpected embrace. "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder, "for giving her this chance." Maxwell held her briefly, inhaling the faint scent of her shampoo, the same one she'd used 7 years ago. "Thank you for raising her," he replied, "for being everything I couldn't be." They separated as the pre-op nurse approached. Maxwell handed the stuffed rabbit to Sarah. "Keep this safe until we're both back." "I will," she promised. As they wheeled him toward the operating room, Maxwell closed his eyes, remembering the boardroom of Pierce Enterprises. 6 months ago, his thoughts would have been consumed with stock prices, acquisitions, and strategic planning. Now, all that mattered was a small girl with his eyes and a spirit he could only hope to emulate. The anesthesia wore off gradually, consciousness returning in hazy fragments. Maxwell became aware of a steady beeping, the antiseptic, smell of the recovery room, and a dull ache in his abdomen. "He's waking up," a voice said nearby. Maxwell forced his heavy eyelids open. Dr. Winters stood beside his bed, checking monitors. "Emily?" Maxwell croaked, his mouth desert dry. "She's doing well," the doctor assured him. "The kidney is functioning beautifully. Perfect match, as we'd hoped." Relief flooded through him, more powerful than the pain medication coursing through his veins. "Where is she?" he managed. "Still in recovery. You'll be able to see her tomorrow, once you're both stronger." Maxwell tried to sit up, wincing as pain lanced through his side. "Easy," Dr. Winters cautioned. "The laparoscopic procedure was successful, but you've still undergone major surgery. You need to rest." "Sarah? With Emily? She's been going back and forth between both of you." Maxwell relaxed slightly, knowing his daughter wasn't alone. His daughter. The phrase still filled him with wonder. "How long was I out?" he asked. "About 6 hours. Everything went according to plan. 6 hours that had changed 3 lives forever." Maxwell closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had transpired. A part of him now lived within Emily, the most worthwhile contribution he'd ever made. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of vital sign checks, pain management, and brief, lucid moments. Sarah appeared periodically, updating him on Emily's progress between her own catnaps in the waiting room. "She's asking for you," Sarah told him during one visit. "They say tomorrow you can be moved to her room if you're both stable." Maxwell nodded, too exhausted for words, but grateful beyond measure. The following afternoon, nurses carefully transferred Maxwell to a reclining chair beside Emily's bed in the pediatric ICU. The sight of his daughter, pale but alive, connected to monitors and IV lines, brought tears to his eyes. "Hey, monkey," he said softly. Emily turned toward his voice, her face lighting up despite her obvious fatigue. "Max, you're okay." "I'm okay," he confirmed. "And you're okay too. The doctors say my kidney likes its new home." "It does," she agreed seriously. "The nurses say it's working super good." Sarah stood on the other side of Emily's bed, dark circles under her eyes, testifying to her sleepless vigil. Yet she was smiling, the first genuine smile Maxwell had seen from her in days. "We make a good team," Emily declared, looking between her parents. "All three of us." Maxwell met Sarah's gaze over their daughter's head. Something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the journey they'd taken, from strangers to antagonists to tentative allies, bound by the miracle lying between them. 6 weeks later, Maxwell stood in the doorway of his home office watching Emily concentrate on the coding tutorial displayed on her tablet. After their release from the hospital, he'd converted the space into a comfortable recovery room, where he could work while keeping Emily company during her convalescence. The transplant had been successful beyond all expectations. Emily's body had accepted the kidney with minimal complications, her strength returning more quickly than the doctors had predicted. Maxwell's own recovery had been slower, a fact that amused Emily to no end. "You're an old man," she teased whenever he winced, while standing. "Respect your elders," he'd retort, secretly delighted by her increasing vitality. The sound of the front door opening announced Sarah's arrival. By mutual agreement, she'd moved into one of the penthouse's guest suites during their recovery period. An arrangement intended to be temporary, but which had gradually evolved into something less defined. "How are my favorite patients?" she called, appearing beside Maxwell in the doorway. "I finished the whole coding module," Emily announced proudly. "Max says I'm a natural." "She debugged a script faster than I could," Maxwell confirmed, his voice warm with pride. Sarah smiled. "Of course she did. She has your brain and my persistence. Poor world doesn't stand a chance." The casual acknowledgement of their shared traits in Emily no longer felt strange. Over the weeks of recovery, as they'd navigated medications, doctor's appointments, and Emily's boundless questions, Maxwell and Sarah had formed a partnership neither had anticipated. "The transplant team called," Sarah said, her tone shifting, to business-like efficiency. "They want to move Emily's next checkup to Thursday instead of Friday." "I'll reschedule the board meeting," Maxwell replied automatically. Sarah gave him a measured look. "You don't have to cancel every meeting for every appointment. I can take her sometimes." "I want to be there," he insisted. "Pierce Enterprises managed without me for 6 weeks. They can handle another afternoon." The company had indeed survived his absence during recovery, largely due to the systems Maxwell had reluctantly put in place under Sarah's practical insistence. He'd learned to delegate, to trust others, to recognize that control wasn't always necessary, lessons that had changed his management style upon his return. "We should celebrate after the appointment," Emily suggested, "if my numbers are good." "They will be," Sarah assured her. "But celebration sounds perfect. What did you have in mind?" Emily's eyes sparkled with mischief. "The three of us should go to dinner at that fancy restaurant Max is always talking about." Maxwell and Sarah exchanged glances. They had carefully maintained separate spheres, despite living under the same roof, co-parents rather than a couple. "That sounds nice," Sarah said carefully. "If Max isn't too busy." "Never too busy," Maxwell replied, the words coming easily now. 6 months ago, such a statement would have been unthinkable. His calendar meticulously scheduled in 15-minute increments, personal time, a foreign concept. Emily beamed. "Perfect. I'll wear my new dress." Later that evening, after Emily had gone to bed, Maxwell found Sarah on the penthouse terrace, gazing out at the city lights. He poured her a glass of wine and joined her at the railing. "She's getting stronger every day," Sarah observed, accepting the glass. "She's remarkable," Maxwell agreed. "Like her mother." Sarah smiled faintly. Flattery, Mr. Pierce. Observation, Miss Mitchell. They stood in companionable silence, the frigid winter air softened by heat lamps placed strategically around the terrace. The lease on the apartment near the hospital expires next month, Sarah said finally. Maxwell tensed slightly. I know. I've been looking at places closer to Emily's school. You could stay here, he suggested, trying to keep his tone casual. The arrangement has worked well for Emily's recovery. Sarah turned to face him directly. And when her recovery is complete? What then, Maxwell? The question hung between them, weighted with possibilities. I'd like you both to stay, he said simply. I've never had a home before, Sarah. Not really. This was just a place I slept between meetings. Now it's different. Because of Emily, she clarified. Because of both of you. Maxwell set his wineglass down, gathering courage for words he'd never spoken. I'm not the man you met 7 years ago. I'm not even the man who called you 6 months ago, ready to berate you for missing an interview. No, Sarah agreed softly. You're not. When I thought I might lose Emily during the surgery, I realized something. It wasn't just fear of losing my daughter. It was fear of losing what we've built, this family, however unconventional. Sarah's expression remained guarded. Co-parenting doesn't require living together, Maxwell. This isn't about convenience, he insisted. It's about what I want, what I hope you might want too. And what's that? A chance. Maxwell took a careful step closer, to see if there's something between us worth exploring. Not for Emily's sake, but for our own. Sarah studied him, her expression unreadable. You broke my heart once before. No, I was a fool. You were, she agreed, but a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. A brilliant, ambitious, utterly clueless fool. I've improved on the clueless part, Maxwell offered. The rest is still a work in progress. Sarah laughed softly, the sound warming him more effectively than the terrace heaters. Haven't we all? She sipped her wine thoughtfully. One condition. Name it. We take it slow, for all our sakes. Emily's been through enough change. Agreed. Maxwell felt hope expanding in his chest. Dinner this Thursday after Emily's appointment? Just the three of us? Just the three of us, Sarah confirmed. Higher, Daddy, push me higher, Maxwell obliged, giving the swing another gentle push as Emily soared toward the clear summer sky. The park bustled with weekend activity, families, enjoying the perfect June weather. 1 year had passed since that fateful phone call, a year of hospital visits, recovery milestones, and gradual healing, both physical and emotional. Emily's new kidney functioned perfectly, her energy restored to full 6-year-old, now 7-year-old, capacity. Sarah approached, carrying an ice cream cone in each hand. "1 chocolate for the monkey," she announced, handing it to Emily as the swing slowed. "And 1 vanilla for the old man." Maxwell accepted the cone with mock indignation. 46 is hardly ancient. Ancient enough to complain about your back after 15 minutes of swinging, Sarah teased, settling beside him on the park bench. Emily skipped ahead to the jungle gym, her ice cream clutched carefully in one hand. Maxwell and Sarah watched. Her climb with the easy confidence of a healthy child, a sight they never took for granted. "The school called today," Sarah mentioned. "They want to move Emily into the advanced math program." "Not surprising," Maxwell replied proudly. "Did I tell you she reprogrammed my smart home system yesterday, rewrote the entire interface to include her favorite music in every room?" Sarah laughed. "Your programming genes with my stubbornness is a dangerous combination. I wouldn't have it any other way." Maxwell took her hand, the gesture now familiar and comfortable. The past year had transformed all three of them. Sarah had accepted a full-time position with Pierce Enterprises, heading a new division focused on educational technology. Maxwell had restructured the company's leadership, delegating day-to-day operations to focus on strategic direction and, more importantly, to be home for dinner most nights. Their relationship had evolved slowly, carefully. Movie nights, with Emily becoming family traditions, professional respect developing into deeper understanding, separate bedrooms gradually becoming a formality rather than a necessity. "I've been thinking," Maxwell said, watching Emily demonstrate her climbing skills to another child. "Remember that coding boot camp you wanted to attend? The one you put on hold when Emily got sick?" Sarah nodded. "What about it?" "You should do it, if you still want to." She turned to him, surprised. "That was just a stepping stone. I don't need it now." "Not for your career," he agreed. "But you were excited about it, passionate. I don't want you to give up dreams because of circumstances." Sarah studied him thoughtfully. "When did you become so insightful?" "I had good teachers." Maxwell squeezed her hand. "You and Emily showed me what actually matters." She leaned against his shoulder, a gesture of affection that still thrilled him. "I might look into it. There's a weekend program that could work with my schedule." "Whatever you need to make it happen." Maxwell hesitated, then added, "Actually, I've been thinking about scaling back myself." "You, the ultimate workaholic?" "Former workaholic," he corrected. "I'm considering stepping down as CEO, remaining as chairman but bringing in new leadership." Sarah straightened, turning to face him fully. "Are you serious? Pierce Enterprises is your life's work." "It was," Maxwell acknowledged. "Now it's just work, important work, but not what defines me anymore." He nodded toward Emily, now organizing the other children into some complex game of her own invention. "She's what matters. You're what matters." Sarah's eyes softened. "Maxwell Pierce voluntarily relinquishing control. I never thought I'd see the day." "Neither did I," he admitted, "but nearly losing Emily, it changed my perspective permanently. I don't want to miss anything else." They watched their daughter in comfortable silence, the summer sun warming their shoulders. After a moment, Maxwell reached into his pocket. "I have something for you," he said, suddenly nervous. "No pressure, no expectations. Just a question." Sarah's eyes widened as he withdrew a small velvet box. "Maxwell, I'm not rushing," he assured her quickly. "It doesn't have to be soon. It doesn't even have to be yes. But I wanted you to know where I stand, what I hope for." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. "I love you, Sarah. I think I've loved you since that weekend in San Diego, but I was too blinded by ambition to recognize it. I want to build a life with you and Emily, a real family." Sarah stared at the ring, then at Maxwell, tears gathering in her eyes. "You rehearsed this, didn't you?" He smiled sheepishly. "For weeks, Emily helped." "She knows. She suggested the park, said it was more romantic than a fancy restaurant." Sarah laughed through her tears. "She's right." She took a deep breath. "Ask me properly." Maxwell slid from the bench onto one knee, unconcerned about his expensive suit on the park ground. "Sarah Mitchell, will you marry me?" From the jungle gym, Emily's voice rang out. "Say yes, Mom." Sarah and Maxwell both turned to see their daughter watching intently, surrounded by curious children and smiling parents. "We have an audience," Sarah murmured, blushing. "I'm waiting for an answer," Maxwell reminded her, still kneeling. Sarah's smile bloomed fully as she nodded. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." A cheer erupted from the jungle gym as Maxwell slipped the ring onto Sarah's finger and pulled her into an embrace. Emily abandoned her game and raced toward them, launching herself into their arms with characteristic enthusiasm. "We're going to be a real family now," she exclaimed. Maxwell held his daughter and his fiancée close, marveling at the journey that had brought them here. From a mistaken medical diagnosis, to a missed job interview, to a life-saving transplant, the path had been neither straight nor easy, but it had led exactly where he needed to be. "We already are a family," he said softly. "Now we're just making it official." Emily looked up at him with his own eyes bright with happiness. "I told you calling me that day was the best thing ever." Maxwell couldn't help but agree. That single phone call, made in anger, answered in innocence, had changed everything. The ruthless CEO who believed himself incapable of fatherhood had found his greatest purpose in the little girl who called him Daddy, and the woman who had given him a second chance. As the summer sun warmed the three of them, Maxwell Pierce, once defined by his wealth and power, finally understood the true meaning of being rich, the love of family, the gift of second chances, and the miracle of a child's voice on the phone saying those 6 life-changing words, "Mommy says you're my daddy."